Okay, real talk. When was the last time you went a full day without washing your hands? Maybe after a camping trip, you felt absolutely disgusting after just 48 hours. Now imagine going your entire life, never once touching a bar of soap. No shampoo, no deodorant, no toothbrush. And here's the wild part. Scientists now believe that prehistoric humans may have actually been cleaner than most people living in medieval Europe thousands of years later. Yeah. The people with no running water, no products, and no plumbing might have smelled better than knights in castles. Stay till the end, because the last part of this video will completely flip how you think about what clean even means. So, how exactly did cavemen stay clean? Let's go back, way, way back. Picture this. It's about 50,000 years ago. You wake up in a shallow cave somewhere in what will one day be called Europe. The air is cold and sharp. There's no mirror, no sink, no morning routine, at least not one you'd recognize. But you're not just some dirty, grunting beast rolling around in mud. You're a fully modern human being with the same brain, the same instincts, and, surprisingly, the same basic desire to not feel disgusting. Because here's the thing people always get wrong about prehistoric humans. They assume ancient people just didn't care about being clean. But that assumption falls apart the second you start looking at the evidence. Cleanliness for early humans wasn't a luxury, it was survival. Let's start with the most obvious tool they had, and it's one you probably pass every single day without thinking about it: water. Early humans were not random wanderers stumbling through the wilderness. They were strategic. They deliberately built their camps and settlements near rivers, lakes, and streams. And a big reason for that, beyond drinking, was washing. Archaeological evidence shows that prehistoric people regularly used natural water sources to clean their bodies, their tools, and their food. Rivers weren't just a water supply. They were the original shower. And if you think standing in a cold river doesn't count as getting clean, think again. Moving water is actually incredibly effective at removing dirt, bacteria, and dead skin from the human body. You don't technically need soap to get clean. You need friction and water. And our ancestors had figured that out long before anyone ever thought to mix animal fat with ash and call it a bar of soap. But water was just the beginning. Here's where it gets really interesting. Early humans were incredibly observant. They watched the world around them constantly, because their lives depended on it. And somewhere along the way, they noticed something. Certain plants, when rubbed against skin or crushed and mixed with water, created a slippery, foamy effect. These were naturally occurring plant saponins, basically nature's own soap. Plants like soapwort, yucca root, and certain tree barks contain these compounds, and they genuinely work as cleansing agents. Prehistoric people weren't stumbling around clueless. They were experimenting, observing, and passing knowledge down through generations. Some researchers believe the use of plant-based cleansers goes back tens of thousands of years, long before the first recorded recipe for soap showed up in ancient Mesopotamia around 2800 BCE. So next time someone tells you cavemen were primitive, remind them that they were doing botanical chemistry before civilization even had a name for it. Now let's talk about something a little more unexpected, something that sounds strange at first, until it starts making a lot of sense. Fat and clay. Several ancient cultures, and this practice likely stretches back into prehistoric times, used animal fat and natural clay to clean themselves. Here's the logic. You rub fat or oil over your skin, and it binds to the dirt and grime. Then you scrape it all off, using a flat stone, a shell, or even just your fingers. The clay, meanwhile, acts almost like a modern-day exfoliating scrub, pulling oils and impurities out of the skin. Sound familiar? It should. Because the ancient Greeks and Romans did a very polished version of this exact same thing. Athletes would coat themselves in olive oil, wrestle and train, and then scrape the whole mixture off with a curved metal tool called a strigil. Wealthy Romans considered this a full cleansing ritual, but the roots of that behavior, they go back much, much further, to early humans figuring out that fat plus abrasion equals cleaner skin. Okay, but what about hair and teeth? Because those feel like the real challenges, right? Let's do teeth first.
This one is genuinely jaw-dropping, and I mean that almost literally. Archaeologists have found evidence of prehistoric dental care. Ancient humans used small sticks, often from specific types of trees with natural antibacterial properties, to pick food from between their teeth. These were essentially the first toothpicks, and, in some cases, the first toothbrushes. The frayed end of a chewing stick creates bristles that scrub the tooth surface. This practice is actually still used in parts of Africa and the Middle East today, and studies have shown it's genuinely effective at reducing plaque. But there's something even wilder. Analysis of prehistoric teeth through dental calculus, which is basically fossilized plaque, has revealed that early humans had far fewer cavities than people in early agricultural societies. Why? Because hunter-gatherers weren't eating refined sugars and grains. Their diet, mostly meat, roots, berries, and nuts, was naturally lower in the bacteria-feeding sugars that rot teeth. Their dental hygiene wasn't perfect, but their diet accidentally protected them in ways our modern mouths can only wish for. Now, hair. Okay, so nobody's claiming prehistoric humans had salon-worthy hair. But again, the story is more nuanced than they just never washed it. Evidence suggests that early humans used various natural substances, certain clays, plant extracts, and even animal fats to condition and manage their hair. And here's the thing about hair that most people don't know. Hair actually has a natural self-cleaning cycle. When you stop using commercial shampoo, which strips your scalp's natural oils, your scalp gradually recalibrates. Within a few weeks to a few months, many people find their hair becomes less greasy and more manageable on its own. This is sometimes called the no-poo method today, and it has thousands of years of accidental evidence behind it. Early humans weren't fighting their hair's natural biology with a cocktail of synthetic chemicals. They were working with it, using water, plant materials, and natural oils to keep hair manageable, deloused, and relatively clean. Speaking of which, parasites. Lice and fleas were a real challenge for prehistoric humans. But here's where community behavior comes in. Grooming one another, picking through each other's hair and skin, wasn't just a social bonding activity. It was practical hygiene, just like our primate cousins still do today. This mutual grooming behavior is deeply wired into the human social instinct. Staying clean was, in a very real sense, a group effort. And now, the part that might actually change how you think about ancient humans forever. Here's a modern comparison that should hit you hard. In medieval Europe, a period most people romanticize as grand and sophisticated, hygiene standards dropped dramatically compared to what came before. Soap existed, technically, but many people in medieval cities bathed rarely, shared bathwater with multiple family members, and lived in conditions that were, by most measures, far filthier than anything a mobile hunter-gatherer group would have tolerated. Why? Because hunter-gatherers moved. They didn't stay in one place long enough for waste and filth to build up around them. They camped near clean water, they left areas before they became polluted, and they carried their hygiene knowledge with them wherever they went. Settlement, the birth of civilization, actually made things worse for human cleanliness before it eventually made things better. The diseases that swept through ancient and medieval cities? The plagues, the infections, the mass death events. A lot of that came from the hygiene problems that arose when too many humans crammed into one place with no real sanitation system. Your prehistoric ancestor, living in a small group near a clean river, cleaning their teeth with a chewing stick, washing with plant-based foam, and having their hair groomed by a friend, was, in some measurable ways, living cleaner than a medieval European peasant 2,000 years later.
Let's sit with that for a second. We spend so much time looking back at prehistoric humans as the dirty, primitive, before version of us. But the real story is far more interesting. These were intelligent, adaptable, resourceful people who solved the problem of cleanliness with the same ingenuity they applied to everything else. They used what the world gave them: water, plants, clay, stone, community, and they built hygiene routines that worked. Not because someone told them to, but because they paid attention to the world around them and figured it out. The truth is, the definition of clean has always been a moving target. What counts as clean changes with technology, culture, and environment. But the desire to be clean? The instinct to wash off, to groom, to care for your body and the bodies of the people around you. That's not modern. That's not civilized. That is ancient. That is human. That goes back to the very beginning. So the next time you're standing in the shower, reaching for your shampoo and your 3-in-1 body wash, just know that somewhere deep in your biology, there's a version of you standing in a cold river 50,000 years ago, rubbing soapwort leaves on your arms and thinking, yeah, that's better. And honestly, they weren't that different from you at all.